9 years have passed since it initially released, and Battlefield 3 feels like it was only released just yesterday. This is due to the fact that Battlefield 3 was so ahead of its time compared to other games. Battlefield 3 is my favorite shooter of all time, and it's one of those games that set the standard for modern day shooter games. In this video we're going to talk about what Battlefield 3 did so well and how it holds up in 2020, so when you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax and enjoy. Battlefield 3 is a first-person shooter game released on the 25th of October 2011. Battlefield 3 was developed by DICE using the Frostbite 2 engine, and it was published by Electronic Arts, also known as EA Games. Overall, Battlefield 3 is the second best-selling Battlefield game of all time, only being bested by Battlefield 1. Battlefield 3 is however the fastest-selling EA game of all time, selling over a third of its total 15 million sales in the first week after its release. The success of this game is partly thanks to the intense action-packed trailers EA released before releasing the game. And as many other games have proven before, marketing your game in just the right way can be a world of a difference in terms of sales. And Battlefield 3 did the marketing just right. Now we're going to start off by talking about two aspects, being the visuals and the campaign in Battlefield 3. The reason I'd like to start off by talking about these two aspects of the game is because modern games focus more on the multiplayer aspect, because that's what the modern gamer market has slowly shifted to. I personally find Battlefield 3's campaign one of the most memorable out of all of the Battlefield games to date. The majority of the campaign evolves around a modern war in the Iran/Iraq region, but locations like Paris and New York City are also included in the campaign. The reason I found the campaign to be so memorable is because it felt really realistic. Now there are plenty of actual Marines or pilots that have reacted to the Battlefield 3 campaign, mentioning a ton of things that weren't accurate, and those videos are extremely interesting and entertaining to watch. However, as a gamer, I do not care if a game is actually accurate or not. In fact, if a game is too accurate, it probably isn't fun anymore. What I do care about is if the game has a realistic feeling to it once you're actually playing. Because when it feels realistic, you think it's realistic and it pulls you in. The fact that the setting of the game is set in a modern age around 2010 makes it hit that much closer to home and makes it feel like it's an actual war going on right now. The first time I played the campaign in 2012 at exactly 12 years old, I was blown away by the visuals in the game, even though my PC couldn't properly run the game back then. I remember asking my dad to come look how realistic the first mission looked after finally being allowed to buy the game from a game store. Oh yeah. Physically buying a game from a game store was a thing back then. How times have changed, huh? The game felt so realistic that my little 12-year-old brain couldn't take some of the more sensitive scenes in this game. I remember feeling bad for pulling off the guy's gas mask in the Comrades mission, or literally crying because my squad mates ended up getting killed during certain missions. And I'm sure that any other Battlefield fan out there can relate. The campaign really pulls you in and makes you feel like you're actually part of the squad. And yes, the game ending definitely got me alright. That was some deep stuff and a very surprising ending. The game largely felt so realistic due to the fantastic Frostbite 2 engine. The visuals, lighting, effects and destruction physics were far ahead of its time. You know what? Look at the difference between games that were released in around the same time as Battlefield 3 in 2011. Its closest competitor, Modern Warfare 3. A horror FPS game, Dead Space 2, or the next Call of Duty game being Call of Duty Black Ops 2, released at the end of 2012. And as you can see, the difference is just huge. I could add in a bunch of other games like Skyrim and stuff, but those aren't FPS games, so I won't compare them. But really, none of these games even come close. The DLC maps released after launch, like Aftermath and Endgame, also show the beauty of a game Battlefield 3 really is. There is a remarkable difference between some of the launch maps and the DLC maps in terms of visuals. Each DLC added new maps, relevant guns, equipment, and more. These DLC maps were set in various environments and allowed for very different gameplay depending on how open or how enclosed the maps are, further increasing the amount of gameplay variety the game already had. If you are a Battlefield veteran and you've played older Battlefield games and nostalgia was relevant, you had the Back to Karkan DLC as the first DLC for Battlefield 3. If super fast-paced TDM was your thing, the Close Quarters DLC was exactly what you needed. adding tiny fast-paced maps and even a sort of team-based gun game mode called Gunmaster. Are you a vehicle warfare fan? Well, that's where the Armored Kill DLC came in, adding new vehicles and unlocks and a game mode called Tank Superiority and much more. The following DLC, called Aftermath, was a DLC that added some pretty stunning maps with different elevations that caused unique fighting scenarios. It also added one very interesting game mode called Scavenger, which was much like Conquest Domination, except everyone started with a handgun and some grenades, and you had to find weapons around the map to hold points. Then finally, the last DLC, called Endgame, added 4 different maps set in a certain season of the year, and a lot more. But the thing that stood out the most was the Air Superiority game mode, which is basically Conquest, but then with every player in a fighting jet. Pretty awesome, right? I do have to say though, on PC there's no active servers for this game mode anymore, there's only some empty ones. Now sure, you probably already know that Battlefield 3 had a good campaign, a co-op campaign, and 5 DLCs, but let's start talking about what made Battlefield such a masterpiece of a game, and why I think it's the best Battlefield game of all time. As a first-person shooter fan, I think one of the most important things in an FPS game is shooting, aka gunplay. Battlefield 3 has really good gunplay. You die pretty quick in Battlefield 3 and there is no way of quickly sliding around the corner if a player catches you in the open, like in some more modern FPS shooter games. Now most Battlefield players, I assume, play Battlefield for the large-scale maps and battles with up to 64 players, and back in 2011, 64 players in an FPS game was pretty special. Especially because you could be cramped up with this amount of players in some small maps like in the Close Quarters DLC, resulting in absolute chaos. Even on some larger maps, playing the Rush game mode 64 players felt chaotic, in a good way. Now something like Conquest on Operation Metro with 64 players is something you cannot experience in any other game. It's just absolute mayhem with people spamming grenades and bullets into narrow corridors. It's beautiful. Now that may not be everyone's idea of having fun, and that's where the multitude of other game modes come into play. Even 9 years after its release, some of the game modes are still really active, at least on PC. There's literally a game mode for every type of player. However, I think we can all agree that TDM on Nosher Canals is one of the most memorable experiences and something almost every player has to have done at some point to level up the weapons or to unlock certain abilities pretty fast. Speaking of the unlock system, I kind of liked it. The level and kit progression felt really nice and I never really thought about it and just unlocked things as I played along. The vehicle upgrades, however, seemed a lot more tedious to obtain. Without upgrades, most vehicles were significantly weaker than someone with the upgrades, meaning that as a new player you were simply at a disadvantage in game modes like Conquest. But of course, EA had a solution, and that was pay-to-skip packages, which in my opinion are slightly pathetic. As you might know, they continue to branch out in terms of microtransactions from Battlefield 3 onward. Apart from the microtransactions and upgrades though, something that was really surprising was the infantry vehicle balance. Players couldn't just hop into a tank and go 15-0, especially if the ground units or players knew what they were doing. You can just as easily be taken out in a tank as running through an open field in Battlefield 3 depending on your skill. This is the case for everything except jets, by the way, because jet pros on PC going 100 something else, I just never seem to be able to take them out. But generally speaking, it's really balanced and that's impressive for a game of this size. Now the map design in Battlefield 3 is really well done. Just think to yourself for a second how many maps in Battlefield 3 or 4 you'd like to see return in another Battlefield game. You probably couldn't mention many, if any. While in Battlefield 3 most of the maps are designed great for multiple game modes and you'd probably like to see them back in a future Battlefield as a remastered map. The class system also made a lot of sense. The equipment and weapons were distributed well between the Recon, Support, Engineer and Assault class. While in Battlefield 4, Engineers have freaking PDWs, meaning Personal Defense Weapon. Like, why is that the main weapon for the Engineer? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. One thing I do like in Battlefield 4 compared to Battlefield 3 is that the Recon has the ability to bring C4, making the Recon a more viable class for Conquest or Rush game modes. Now the balance overall is good, but that doesn't keep players from using the Assault class 24/7 for team deathmatch or close quarter gameplay. There is no benefit to using another class other than leveling up the weapons or kits, other than possibly enjoying certain weapon types more. like the sniper rifle or carbines. The assault class has a health pack that is extremely useful for running and gunning. Besides that, you can instant revive people for the same amount of points as getting a kill, which is not exactly balanced, and they did end up changing this in Battlefield 4 for the better, where if you instant revive someone, they would only respawn with 20% health, and if you wanted to revive your teammate with 100% health, you had to charge up your defibrillator. And in Battlefield 5, for example, and yes, I know Battlefield 1 is in between Battlefield 4 and 5, they changed it so that every teammate can revive, but medics can revive much quicker. But there are a lot of things that are wrong with Battlefield 5, but I won't be covering those in this video, but there's just another reason why Battlefield 3 is such a good game. Now, because of that reason, the Assault class was the most popular class in any gun-only game mode, so any game mode without vehicles. The classes were also suited pretty well for team play, as you also had squad perks, and when used smartly, for example, one player uses squad sprint, one player uses squad ammo, etc. You could have more grenades, more ammo, sprint fast, and all that stuff for every person in your squad, being a maximum of 4 players. And that's a lot of extra versatility when playing as a team, especially in voice chat. Now, I can talk about this game for a long time, but there are just so many things that make this game one of the best shooters of all time. There are so many only in Battlefield moments in Battlefield 3, or things you can only do in Battlefield games compared to other games, that make this game super unique, and one that I will always keep playing as long as the server is on PC or online. And sure, there might be games that are newer and more popular, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare with the Warzone free-to-play Battle Royale game mode, which is pretty fun, I must admit, but sometimes you just want to go back to Battlefield 3 or any other older game and just experience it as it was back then, either for nostalgia or just for pure fun, or because you miss the experience of that particular game. And that's another reason why I wanted to make this video, even though I'm a mainly RuneScape channel. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please leave a like down below. And if you enjoy Battlefield and you're a Battlefield veteran watching, let me know your best Battlefield moment down in the comments below. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.